All right. Hello. Welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in, sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome, and welcome back if you have. My intention is unity and oneness and the highest levels of love light. So this particular video is a video where I break down and interpret some of the writings that I've done and shared. I'm also, so in this particular writing that I'm about to share, essentially what I was shown through from my higher guidance team is what we are doing as a collective. And they used certain words. And when I say they, I tune in to a collective of beings, and it changes based on the information that I'm tuning into, but primarily I'm connecting through to source energy and connecting with my higher aspect. My higher aspects are future versions from one perspective of me. That's what our higher self is from one perspective. From other perspectives, it's a more higher dimensional version of ourselves. But I'm also tuning into my guides, angelic realms. I tune into the animal realm. It just depends on what I'm connecting in with. Is it earth changes? Is it, just depends on where we're at. So this particular writing was very coded. And the way that it was described was it's a living codex of plays on words and languages that allow us to access a frequency. And it's a multidimensional interpretation and display of word formatting, connections to different memory complexes, and it can be very activating as well. So, and again, in a nutshell, it's basically what I'm speaking about is us working together as a computer program, basically as a virus for the virus. And this has to do with us. If you've ever seen the movie The Matrix, which if you haven't, I highly recommend that you give it a shot. It's one of my favorite movies. Essentially, in the movie The Matrix, there's a scene where Mr. Smith says to Neo, humanity is the virus. You are the virus. And what I kind of grasped after doing this interpretation of what I was writing was exactly that. We are essentially breaking down the old system that is no longer able to access the potentials, the potentiality that we are accessing as a collective. It can't connect in. The other thing is this has to do with time. So we're changing our relationship with time, and we're literally creating waves of frequency that are extending the nodes, if you will, the points in time in which we are connecting into are way farther, longer than we have been able to connect into in the past. So we're branching out as this Darcy network, if you want to call it that, of humanity. And we are essentially making these huge connections right now. And this is where I'm going to kind of lead into this inflow message. So I'm going to read what I wrote. If you feel like just reading it on your own, you can go onto my blog and website at carrieavon.com. It'll be the most recent. I don't even know what I'm going to label it as, but today is the 23rd, so I'll add 23 in there somewhere to figure out which one it is. And I'm going to read it. So if you want to just skip, maybe 10 minutes in or so where I start to break down the meaning, or you might skip to the end where I recap the whole meaning. So those are the layers that I'm looking at. Layer number 1 will be reading the story. Layer number 2 will be breaking it down. And then at the end, I'll kind of recap what it was all about. I might do 2 videos as well. There was something else I wanted to share, but I kind of lost it. All right. So I'll do some share screen, and I'll be kind of going back and forth. If you want to follow along as I read this, that's fine. But I'll read it out loud first, and then I'll share screen. Okay. So these time bands bend and swell. according to certain influx currencies that create certain distortions in the field, if you will. These measures of frequency sets creates a node. The node then eventuates a higher tunnel of pathology. Let us play with this for a bit. And by the way, it gets a little easier as we progress. Frequency patterns that are spinning right now are creating nodes, are creating spaces and places in which we can categorize certain frequency time mechanics. These particular substrings, substrains, substranules, substriations create pockets of resistance. Let us restate this. Technology, stream, play. These substriation network pockets create bandwidths of reorganization. It layers up, if you will, and allows for a certain reflectology, a certain frequency to interconnect and band together to unify a grid. To unify a grid substance existence. The grid substance, squid, I was hearing the word squid, expression, so the grid substance expression is then utilized to harmoniously interplay with the children, the light children. I am seeing sound. This allows us to unify certain Bangladesh, and Spangle. I'm going to come back and play with this. Substituent. We realize these words. I wrote a fair amount, aquarified, substituent, amount. We realize these words are beyond the time and space that you are used to speaking them in. Yet they are interlaced and interwoven within you. So as you allow yourself to tune in and band with these frequencies, it creates a pattern of least resistance. So vive la resistance, if you will, play on words. But not to be in the resistance, let go of the resistance. Remember before. Remember when you have done this before. Remember when you have used the entire word bank, the entire environment, if you will, from every person, place, or thing, from within your environment, holds within it a clue that you can then hold and utilize to then provide the glue, to tie in with the wording you are connecting to. Open source, open wingspan, spin. And so these patterns then create a distortion in the field, if you know what I mean. I think that's a play on words too. This is hard to understand for some reading, like Nostradamus did with his quatrains. Yet there is an element of multidimensionality for those who can read between the lines. So it is a living codex that can change accord in to the time bands it was created in, and the time bands it is connecting to in the future also. There are many different realms. So the nodes are beefing up, if you will. All the node convergences are creating this frequency pattern and casts an array. Within this array are certain nodes that are accessed and harnessed in order to broaden the full light spectrum. And it requires a certain visual alchemy from one perspective to then verify and see this. It creates the ability to distort the frequencies that are attempting to cast out, if you will, the Hippocrates, play on words. You are creating a bandwidth. And as you create this bandwidth, we propose that this bandwidth moves beyond, oops, hold that thought. We propose that this bandwidth moves beyond your alchemical trajectory. This is just to allow you the time. Allow you the time to tune in and record what it is that you are seeing. For as you record what it is that you are recording, if you will, you then allow the energies to be harnessed inferentially in a new way. For the harnessing of these energies and frequencies creates the ability to display new time bands. And so what is it that we are getting at, if you will, play on words? Let us roll back a moment. Your ability to see clearly and look at the light that is viewing you, that you are viewing, that you are bringing into view, that you are reviewing, that you are viewing up, if you will, that you are. It gives you an analogous perspective to peer into the past. It gives you the ability to peer in and through that which has been grooved out, if you will. It allows you to slip through the cracks. It allows you to slip in through the cracks in time. It allows you to take a crack. It allows you to take a bite out of crime, take crack off the street, play on words. Why is this relevant to this now moment? Your relevancy is clearly based, baseline. Many references to crack, and this is ironic and a perfect example of using all words as tools. No matter what we may associate as negative or positive, it is really about word association and memory and staying in a neutral point of view to use all the words as tools and connection points. I was hearing baseline blow and then white lines blow away. It allows you to launch into a different spectrum. You do this all while sitting in your chair. And at times, this can be overwhelming. You think there is so much here. Hair, the 3 hairs. Where do I begin? Yet we assure you that you begin again and again and again in this way, so that you can then create beyond the illusion. For that which has been created is an illusion, play on words. All that you see is a divisive mechanism that has been created to restore your ability to create. For you were once lost in a sea of creation, unknowingly creating, unknowingly ripping apart the fabric of time, space-time in which you were aligned with, play on words. Do not be alarmed at the idea of ripping apart space-time. This is not a negative attribute. We are not saying that you were involved in the time jumper problematic schematic. You are not necessarily part of that jumpsuit. I am seeing RIP, RIP, has many layers to it, like pulling out information, rest in peace. And as you resource this information, it allows us to resource with you codes and fractional abilities. Okay, let us move into a different bandwidth. So we can acclimate to these frequencies with more. Okay, let me rephrase that. Okay, let us move into a different bandwidth. We can acclimate to these frequencies with more. There are 2 different perspectives. There are two different ways to view things. Of course, there are more ways than two, but we show you both sides of the coin, if you will. This allows you to dip in between the middle ground. This allows you to move in the middle, into the middle, and dissect from a multi-layered, multi-perpetual point of view. I was seeing a perpetual motion watch or clock. And you may wonder why we reference time so much right now, or excuse me, why we reference so much with time right now. It is because the coordinates on your system are mapping you into a particular timeology. The mapping coordinates, the mapping coordination, the mapping then coordinates, coordinate, organizes, connects with the innate to the core, puts it in a sequence, different characteristics that create a linear projection that then creates a reality subordination, play on words. This subordination ordinates a sequential set of numerical, numerological, counterintuitive. That was a play on words. Counting it, it's a counter. You are counting it intuitively. Aho. The coordinates allow you to plug in a reset. As you reset your own coordinates, you allow that which has been accessed to be publicized. As you publicize, play on words, these different components, you begin to realize that you are the mapping system. You are the coordinates. You are the subordination, if you will. The subordinates, play on words, the frequency sets then combine to create an alchemical alignment with all of your recourses interactions. These pre-coursed interactions were not set in stone, yet were merely set up in order to help localize your harmonic convergence. They were set up to engage more fully with your spirit source energy. They were set up so you could engage more fully with the divine aspect of equilibrium, of equal liberation, equalitarianism, equilibrium. For within your own skin holds a microbiology that was set in motion before time began from one perspective. The microbiology that was set within your own kingdom harnesses and associates with a network of pre-encapsulated time mechanic brokerages, play on words. These time mechanic brokerages create the ability, agility, to map out certain influctuations, if you will. These are then dialed into a superconductor of the most organic attributes, play on words, organism, organs in a body, music, organelles, organization, organeologies. As you allow yourself to move into this hub, you then create a distorted color field. And I'll come back to this because this reminds me of Andrew Bartz's. This allows you to truly connect, to truly create sorry, I had to add something there, and not be manipulated in other directional courses that do not fit with your trajectory, trajectoriology. You then see through the matrix. You then self-destruct the whole facade of self, if you will. You create an equilibrium protocol that then adjusts the time period and the timepiece accordingly. For this has been broken for so long that what we have been left to work with was out of scale, play on words. This weighs heavy. It is time. There are so many things we can express right now. However, as we express in this way, we allow you to pen, to open, and convey from a different place. Your realms you have existed within are still in existence within, and you are essentially a viral overload. You then overload the system with a viral influctuation of mass consciousness of delight. Play on words. This mass consciousness, so to speak, lights up the spectrum so that others may see, so that others may remember, so that others may disambiguate from the frequencies that have been truly mismapped. Play on words. Many have been misguided. Many have fallen into a system of hierarchy and control. This system of hierarchy and control has created a bound mindlessness, binding full of mindlessness, binding full of a mechanical overlay. And even though we project or prophesize the future in these transmissions, the future is now. You are upsetting the coil, and this is creating a wrinkle, a ripple, Rip Van Winkle. I am seeing that people that were sleeping were creating a wrinkle also, for they were not utilizing their potential, and it made the path less smooth. They were so overlaid with this intense velocity of these mechanical interruptions. So that's why. This worked for a while. This created the ability to destabilize for so long and to be destabilized. Now it is uninterruptible, for the air is cleared. We are interrupted no more. Play on words. You are in the process of receiving upgrades. It will feel funny. It will feel out of tune at times because you are tuning. You are tuning into, and this creates a vibrational frequency. Vibrant, seal, patency, lift. Play on words. It creates a lift in your codex, and this then creates more distortion in the field. I am creating the distortion against the distortion. I am seeing this energy that is trying to attach to us, to figure us out, to predict and model after us, and it just can't. These messages will change and recalibrate according to what is coming in and according to what is the highest match, if you will, for what is necessary in this complexity of incoming changes. Be kind on yourself. Be kind to your body, for you must love yourself. You must love what it is that you are creating. You must love every aspect of your life, even when it feels like you are in strife, for these particular experiences are rife with frequencies, ripe with frequencies, rife frequencies. And these frequencies of these particular experiences are part of your implosion. They allow you to counterbalance with these other energies in such a way that they cannot calibrate to your own display of harmonic frequencies. This keeps those at bay who are not willing to play the same game, if you will. For this has stretched beyond the confounds of your imagination. Yet, if you can stretch your imagination beyond the confounds of the mind, you will allow yourself to see with new eyes, with clarity, that which has been birthed and we are all accessing. It can be felt as we strip away the facade of what we think we feel. For what we think we feel. For what we think we feel, for when we think we feel something, It is merely an attribute of the senses that has not been fully attributed. It has not been fully functioning. For when we feel something that is truth, we know. We don't think, we know. It becomes our truth. It becomes our very fabric of our existence. And we cannot have one without the other. We cannot have self-mastery without feeling. All that we have in this fulfilling reality, full feeling, full of feeling, for our agility and ability to utilize all aspects of the divine, co-creative, technologically, local technology-based body and recognizing that is key. Let us sit tight for this moment and let us calibrate, if you will. For the calibrations that are being made are not yet locked in a consistent way. They are held and they are reworking with a systematic approach. Some discrepancies that you are tuning into, these discrepancies are in part because there is a unified bandwidth that is still processing misaligned occurrences. And it is only natural the distortions from the human aspect are still being waylaid and processed. So buckle up, if you will, and hold on. For the wild ride that is now part of your reality is temporary. Yet it is jam-packed with the necessary ingredients to stabilize the new earth bandwidths. And so you are innately guided to where you need to go. It seems convoluted in this now time, for the opportunities are many. So too are the calamities from one perspective. The ability to calm the seas, so to speak, seize the day. So here's the scoop. Your outer bands are merging with your inner bands and vice versa. This will take time to conduct patterns that can then be recognized in an easier and more negotiable linear way. Today is a powerful day for integrating some of those patterns. As you integrate these patterns, it then creates a wave that is highly conductible. This highly conductible wave then seismically accumulates and vibrates out all of the loose packaging. There is more, and we could play with this. But again, the sponge is full. This is not intended to overload you or your senses, so remember this all can be playful. It does not have to be applied. We would recommend you trim the palms, be like a tree, work a little every day and get rid of the loose ends, get rid of and tie up loose ends, and so it is. Okay, long one, I know. Let's go into a little bit more detail. I'm going to bring it up so you guys can look at it just briefly. If again, you could skip all of this towards the end, but it does, there's a lot of things that as I looked this up, I was like, oh, this is really fun for my fellow word nerds. All right, so I'm going to share screen. Maybe. Okay. According to certain influx currencies that create these time bands bend and swell. So it's like they move. According to certain influx currencies. So let's think about the currencies that we've had. A current is a flow. It's an electricity. It's a carrier. It's energy. Okay. So we've had influxes from the sun. We've had planetary alignments. We've had changes in the earth. We've had weather patterns. All of those carry currency, which also is a value or unit of energy. This creates certain distortions in the field. So it's more difficult to see for everyone. Sometimes it's more difficult for us to be able to see, but it's also more difficult for the other side to see. So it's just distorting everything. These measures of frequency sets create a node. So if I go into measures, it took me to bar, okay, which is musical, right? These are measures. So measures of frequency sets creates a node. Break it down. Break it down again. Okay. Oops. So we have the bars, okay? These measures, which is obviously a unit. It's seeing how long something is or how big something is, the size of it. But it's also a segment of time corresponding to a certain number of beats in which every beat is represented by a particular note value. And the boundaries of the bar are indicated on music by the vertical bar lines. So you could look at this end and this end. These are the boundaries. We could also call these notes from one perspective. So dividing music into bars provides regular reference points to pinpoint locations within a musical composition, okay? So it also says the symbols can be read and played as a batch. So we could look at the whole picture. It makes it easier. So this talks about it. They also call it a time signature. So it's to specify how many pulses are contained in each measure and which note value is equivalent to this. So if you look at this, the pulses, the notes, so essentially the measures, the pulses, how far apart they are, the boundaries of those pulses of these frequency sets creates a node. So again, that's creating the boundary, but it's also creating a place to hold the information or a connection point. So these measures, beats, pulses, time signatures of frequency sets. This is the frequency as an example, okay? We could go into so many layers, guys. I'm trying to keep it somewhat simple. This is the number of occurrences of a repeating event per unit of time. It is measured in hertz. So we're looking at vibration. We're looking at sound. It's oscillating and vibratory phenomena. It's radio waves. It's light. It's audio signals. It's measured in this hertz, okay? Whew. Just went a little out there. So this measures of these hertz, or how often it occurs, the pulses, the light, the sound, it creates a node. You go into a node. Okay, so many different things here. Look, we've got more waves. So a node is a point along a standing wave where the wave has minimum amplitude. So these are as the wave moves, there's less, these are all nodes, right? I'm going to cut some of this. I also see this as a reference to 0 point and staying in neutral, because we look at a standing wave. The nodes are a series of locations at equally spaced intervals where the wave amplitude is 0. So I see that as symbolic, like we are the nodes holding that 0 point space. And I talked about this in a video the other day. It's basically we're canceling out the other stuff, all that noise. We're holding that space and it cancels it out so it doesn't take us into another time. We're creating this space where we're like, okay, we're holding the space together. So we're holding the same space as perhaps some of these other disharmonious things, and we're canceling that out by bringing it to 0 point. We're creating that space. At these points, two waves add with the same phase and reinforce each other. So those are antinodes. We're not reinforcing it. We are helping clear the resistance. Okay, I could go into so many different things. I wanted to go into, this talks about sound waves, talks about overtones, talks about orbitals. I mean, oh my goodness, we could go to so many different places, but let's just say, so these measures of frequency sets creates a node. If you go into this node, I also like to use the computer science a lot. A node is a basic unit of a data structure. It is a linked list or tree. So essentially, we are these fixed moving spaces in time. We are these nodes. We're linking up like a tree, and they contain data. So we're extending the space in which we're reaching out and creating these nodes through these longer waves, okay? And this also links to other nodes. So the links are often implemented by pointers. Now, if I go into pointers, a pointer is an object that stores a memory address. So I just am blown away by this always. So we're all nodes. We all hold memory addresses, but we'll get to that maybe at a different time. The node then eventuates a higher tunnel of pathology. So let us play with this a bit. I'm going to come back to that maybe in a different video, but essentially a tunnel is you're going through something and you're inside of something, and it's a point A to point B. We could say it takes you somewhere. And it's taking us somewhere in the body, but it's also taking us somewhere in different places in space-time and dimensional field access. And it is a different path, okay? And we'll come back to that in just a moment. Frequency patterns that are spinning right now are creating nodes, are creating spaces and places in which we can categorize. So we're putting them into a particular language or set, okay? And then we can categorize certain frequency time mechanics. These particular substrings, substriations, substranules create pockets of resistance. So I'm going to just stop right there. So if you look at a string on an instrument, okay, I like to go back to nodes. There's a part in music. Well, essentially the string on a guitar, when one piece of the string lines up where it connects, is the node, right? It connects those ends of the string and it ties them together. And because of how it's far apart it's spaced, that determines what the sound or the composition vibrates at or sounds like, okay? So they're also saying that the number of nodes in a specified length is directly proportional to the frequency of the wave. So the higher frequency we are, the longer the wave goes, and it changes the direction of where the nodes are located. And it talks about they're used to create harmonics. So we're getting, when I wrote at the beginning, the time bands bend and flex, or what did I write? I put bend and swell, okay? Well, when you look at node here, it talks about when the finger is placed on top of the string at a certain point, but does not push the string all the way down, a third note is created. So we had these sounds before, but now because of this fluctuation, we're creating another sound. We're creating more dimensions to the sound. And a harmonic is sounded. Now, I didn't realize that this fretboard and frets, this may have something to do with what I was writing later, but wow, boy, there are so many things I could go into here. Okay. So these particular substrings, they're below, maybe it's an undertone, okay? Substriations, I'm gonna just pause for a moment and show you, that was symbolic as well. All right, these substriations create pockets of resistance, these particular substrings, substrains. So if we strain something, it's a different strain, it's a piece of something. So a particular virus, for example, this is a strain of that. It's a version of that. It's connected, but it isn't the same. This is sub, so it's another, it's a unit, it's a substitute, it's part of it. It's also below it. And so these striations that are below create pockets of resistance. So I'm seeing these bandwidth as striations. So if you look at the striations on here, it's linear marks. So again, we're back to marking points in time and how far apart things are. We're going to go into this just for a moment. Okay. I wanted to go into the hyperbolic geometry. In hyperbolic geometry, a striation is a reflection across two parallel mirrors. So that's a whole other video, because I'm seeing that is in reference to this as well. We're mirroring this, and it's a reflection across these two parallel mirrors. So that means we're connecting it. That's a whole other can of worms. But if I go to this striation in geology, what do? We're able to see time. We're able to see the past because we can see information that's held within these bands, right? It's a groove, all right? It's created by movement. It's created by weather and all of this. It's beautiful. Okay. These particular substrains, strings, musical instrument connections, threads, create pockets of resistance. Let us restate this. Technology stream play. These substriation network pockets create bandwidths of reorganization. It layers up, if you will, and allows for a certain reflectology. Now, I just read, not realizing I was putting those two things together, about the hyperbolic geometry and the two mirrored reflections that are called a striation. It allows for a certain reflectology, a certain frequency to interconnect and band together to unify a grid substance existence. Now, if I look at this, it's existing. We're making it real. We are reorganizing through these pockets. So I see us as the nodes making these longer waves and connection points. And then when we do that, we expand out this pocket of energy. And held within that energy is a memory of information that is stored within us, within our physical form, but also stored to our connection to our soul spark, right? And to each other, okay? We're unifying the new grid, the new earth grid. We're creating it and making it more of a substance, making it more substantial. We're creating more layers. So it's not just this thin, barely held together energy that's being, pulled at by the older system. And basically, we then unify all of these components, okay? I had been writing down, we created grid substance existence, and I wrote squid. I didn't know what that was. So when I looked up squid, I came to geeksforgeeks.org. I love it. Oops, that's not it. I'm sorry. Just kidding. Let's go to there in a little bit. I went into a government website, okay? So it's on government.gov. And I have all these links on my blog, you guys, in case you want to nerd out and look it up. So let me go back. So these substriation network pockets underneath the layers are creating bandwidths of reorganization, layering up. We're going up, and it allows for a certain reflectology. We're reflecting back to this. An ology is a path, right? If we look at, I use it a lot. In fact, I'm being guided to pause just a moment. So I write ology on a lot of things. And if you look up so it allows for a certain reflectology. Well, the root word is refers to a kinds of speech, writing, or collections of writing. Eulogy or trilogy, trilogy, is derived from the Greek noun logos, speech, story, and account. It's a type of speaking or writing, ology, okay? It's a word-forming element indicating a branch of knowledge, okay? So we're creating this branch at this reflection of knowledge and words, which is essentially how this communication is happening. And it bands together to unify and connect a grid substance existence. So then we become the substance that is existing within the grid that's holding all of this information. When I looked up SQUID, it is a simple bioinformatics grid. They called this one BLAST, is a widely used genetic research tool for analysis of similarity between nucleotide and protein sequences. This paper presents a software application entitled SQUID that makes use of grid technology. The current version, as an example, it's basically adaptation for other computing intensive repetitive tasks that can be easily accomplished in the open source version. So most distributed computing grid systems have complex installation procedures requiring a specialist or have limitations. SQUID is a multi-platform open source program designed to keep things simple. You guys, the synchronicities just crack me up every time. Keep it simple starseeds, open sourced, while offering high-end computing power for a large-scale applications. SQUID also has an efficient fault tolerance and crash recovery system against data loss, being able to reroute jobs upon node failure and recover even if the master machine fails. Our results show that a SQUID application working with N nodes and proper network resources can process faster. It offers high-end computing. It's open source and binary distributions, plug and play. So basically, I am seeing this as us, and it describes exactly what we're doing right there as starseeds. Keep it simple, starseeds. It's all through a grid. So we're creating this, even if things kind of fall apart all around us, we've developed this network in this communicative way that allows us to interact and expand our tentacles, so to speak, through everything. Therefore, stabilizing what it is that we're trying to create in this unified earth. This grid substance expression is then utilized to harmoniously interplay with the children, the light children. I am seeing sound. I was seeing sound, and then I heard twinkling, tinkling, and children's response to it. This allows us to unify certain Bangladesh, and Spangle. And I'll come back to this in just a moment. So let's stick with, we've already discovered SQUID interplays with the children. Well, that was confusing to me because from one perspective, the children are responding to this really high frequency that's coming in, this influx of energies, and we're helping them and they're helping us. The light children are actually multidimensional beings that are literally, I've seen them within bands of light. So that's another meaning. But one thing that I found interesting was if I looked up node in computer science, right? We are the nodes. This is what we're creating, a tree. Each number represents a different node. They contain a value or condition or possibly serve another independent data structure. There's a parent node, okay? So interestingly enough, there's a child node. A child node is a node extending from another node. For example, a computer with internet access could be considered a child node of a node representing the internet. So if I go back and reread this, the grid substance expression is then utilized to harmoniously interplay with the children, the child nodes. In addition to that, there's another child reference down here as well, and I'll come back to that later. The Bangladesh. Well, if I looked up Bangladesh, what I was drawn to was my golden bangle. So I think of the golden years, but also I'm trying to find, this allows us to unify certain spangle dash. And I was like, Bangladesh, spangle. Well, if we look up the origin of the word spangle, and I'll make this bigger. Okay, it's small ornaments, a type of bowl or cup. It's a buckle, it's a clasp, it's a chain, all right, to twist or to weave. Okay, so we look at this and it allows us to unify certain spangle dash. Now, dash is where things that are separated but also drawn together. The dash separates them but pulls them together. Okay, and the spangle are we're weaving. Okay, we are combining all of this. Oops, that was a different, that's divided rule. That's not what I wanted. And so essentially we're looking at this, we're clasping together, okay, and we're twisting and weaving, and we're cupping it, we're holding it in a bowl or a cup. Also, it has to do with sparkles. So we're seeing all these sparkles that we are then coming together. Also, it's a point of light, which I thought was really interesting. So we're pulling together, we're unifying these points of light, okay? And I'll come back to this later, maybe break those other words down more. We realize these words are beyond the time and space that you are used to speaking them in. That's even a play on words. Like the way that I write this, you guys, that I am used to speaking them in. So I'm in that time and space, and in that time and space, I'm not used to speaking those words, but I'm speaking them into this time and space. Yet they are interlaced and interwoven within you. So as you allow yourself to tune in and band with these frequencies, it creates a pattern of least resistance, banding together, creating music together, teaming up, band with these frequencies. We then let go of the resistance, and it helps us to move in a smoother and more fluidity. And that becomes a pattern. So it's easier for others as well to tune into that pattern, because we see things better that have a pattern. It becomes more habitual. So vive la resistance, if you will. Vive is vivid. Okay, be vivid in it, those colors, and long live the resistance. But we are then resisting the resistance because we're in a flow, which is least resistance. So whatever we want to label as the resistance, you know what I mean? Those beings that maybe don't want us to expand. Be not in the resistance, let go of the resistance. Remember before. So that's even a play on words. I can remember before this all happened. I can remember before when this happened. Does that make sense? Like, anyways, remember when you have done this before. Those are two separate things. They're not the same. Remember when you have used the entire word bank. Bank also has to do with nodes. So it's holding something. There's value in it. It's a place to go to exchange something. The entire environment, if you will, from every person, place, or thing from within your environment holds within it a clue you can then hold and utilize to then provide glue, to then tie in with the wording. you are connecting to. As I was saying this, I saw an eagle fly overhead, which means great spirit. It means the ability to see everything around you from higher vision, okay? And open source, open wingspan, spin, which ties me back in with SQUID, which is an open source connection program, which I didn't know at the time that's what it was. I'm also being guided to share, which I kind of forgot about, SQUID. So SQUID is actually also a reference to squid ink. And I've written about this before, and I didn't realize all of the connections that this tied into. Squid releases ink. It distorts the field, so you can't see where it's going. That's what we're doing. We are distorting the field, and those that would like to predict what we're doing can't see what we're doing because we got the squid ink everywhere. And so these patterns then create a distortion in the field. I'm going to put that squid ink. Of course, ink is also, right, communication, or a form of communication, more of a material and a substance. We're actually creating this material substance, if you know what we mean. So I already said that. I'm creating this distortion. This is hard to understand for those reading, not necessarily everyone, but I was shown if this is much like Nostradamus did with his quatrains. So his quatrains were organized in such a way that it seemed like some of it was nonsense, but there is an element of multidimensionality. And for those who can read between the lines, it is a living codex that can change according to the time bands it was created in, and the time bands it is connecting to in the future also. So that whole thing is a play on words. Reading between the lines, it's a living codex. So when you read this now, it can mean one thing. But when you read it in the future, it can mean something different, because essentially it's tuning into, and this isn't just about my writing, this is about us seeing the multidimensionality of everything. So essentially this codex, if we think of it, and I'm being guided to pause just for a moment. So this living light codex that can change. So it's a book. It's bound in a book that bends and expands, okay? And it changed according to, so according, like an accordion, right? It opens and it closes and it expands and it breathes. Musical notes according to, so it chords into, it connects to, but it's also a musical chord. According to the time bands it was created in. So I'm creating this now, okay? So that's what it means now, but it's connecting to other time bands of parallels, the past, the future. Therefore, it changes in the future also. There are many different realms. So the nodes are beefing up, if you will, getting bigger, cow, moo. So I wrote those because essentially these nodes, okay, that are not only holding information, but connection points, and we're establishing this light connects with this light, are getting bigger. Okay, and essentially I wrote down cow, well, child, okay, is also, if you look up the original word of children, calf is associated with children, which is child. And so I'm seeing this again back to these nodes, a node extending from another node. So they're getting bigger, they're expanding, they're beefing up. There's more to this, I'm sure. All the node convergences are creating this frequency pattern and casts an array. Within this array are certain nodes that are accessed and harnessed in order to broaden the full light spectrum. I'm going to stop there for just a moment. So the node convergences, they're coming together. That doesn't mean, so let's picture a circle, it expands out and it gets so big that it touches the boundaries and the outsides of the other nodes and circles, okay? That is an example from one perspective of what's happening. That's holding together the frequency in between the time bands that can then create this bigger space. if we look up the, the frequency pattern casts an array, and within this array are certain nodes. Am I still recording? I think I am. Whew, this has been a long one. So this says an array is collection of items stored at continuous memory locations. And I'm on geeksforgeeks.org. The idea is to store multiple items of the same type together. It makes it easier to calculate the position of each element by simply adding an offset to a base value. The memory location of the first element of the array index is 0. So we're offsetting, again, it's talking about coming back to 0 point, offsetting the energies that have been pushing us into this resistance. We're offsetting that, balancing it out. That's not the only meaning. We're helping to group things together and make it easier to remember and to locate. For simplicity, we can think of an array as a fleet of stairs, where on each step is placed a value. Here, let's say one of your friends. I love this. Here you can identify the location of any of your friends by simply knowing the count of the step that they are on. Now, this is funny because my friend and sister Candace and I always have these kinds of conversations. And one of the things that she and I were talking about is this, the scene from the, what is that movie? Not Wolverine, but Wolverine was part of the mutants, like X-Men. And Xavier goes into the cerebral brain, puts the helmet on, and connects into the entire mutant bank library and can reach out and communicate with any of them in these nodes that in the movie look like synapses on an internet. So then that tells us he could just dial in 200 and connect with me, or 300 and connect with Candace. I'm just saying this is kind of what it looks like. You can identify them. Now, what I'm being shown is that this had been able to be done before. Now we're creating such a color distortion in the field that this is like, we can do this if we're at a higher vibration, if we're using our eagle, a multidimensionality. The lower frequencies can't do that. They only can hit the boundary. Their wave only goes so far. And so that's where they are. What else? So I could go into a lot of that. We'll come back to that in just a moment. This broadens the full light spectrum. So it's bigger. The light gets bigger. And the spectrum of the colors gets bigger and more vibrant, vivid. This requires and they can be accessed. So within this array, so within this setup, within these, within these locations, right, that array, the value, okay, then that energy can be harnessed and accessed by all of us. Okay, it's now open source network, not closed off and rerouting us in a loop. It's no longer a loop from that perspective. And it can be utilized, ridden, harnessed. I see harnessing like riding the wave. Okay, I see it as utilizing that energy. And electricity is what I'm seeing. We can utilize and harness information. It requires a certain visual alchemy from one perspective. So it's nice to be able to see it, to then feel into how it's being created, but also that visual alchemy, something about the vision changes, and this can be clairvoyance. To verify it and see it. So when we see it, it becomes more real. It validates, but it just not validation, it's more verification that it is. and it creates the ability to distort the frequencies. So when we can see what we're doing, we can then distort the frequencies because we're not being pulled into these other schematics and realities that are no longer what we need for our highest expansion. And it creates the ability to distort the frequencies that are attempting to cast out, if you will. So back to cast and array. So these other beings, we can call them whatever we want to label them as, the old agenda, okay, was it also attempting to cast an array? They were attempting to do this, to locate and memorize and then reroute. But what we're doing is distorting the field so they can't do that. And they want to get rid of, and I'm going to pause just for a moment. So they want to cast out the Hippocrates, but we're casting out the hypocrisy. And so this was a play on words. I didn't finish writing that in, but they are attempting to cast out the Hippocrates, the higher knowing, the higher knowledge. Think about the Hippocratic Oath. If you go into here, you go on Hippocrates, the Hippocratic Oath, right? This greater space of higher medicine. This beautiful, so that's what they're trying to get rid of. And we're actually casting out the hypocrisy from our own array. You are creating a bandwidth. And as you create this bandwidth, we propose that this bandwidth moves beyond your alchemical trajectory. So there was this idea that as we alchemize, as we change alchem, right, we go into this higher space of coherence. All right, we combine our frequencies. There was a trajectory of how far we could go. But what my guidance team is saying, we propose that this bandwidth moves beyond that, beyond how we thought we could move. It's bigger than that. Also, a trajectory is a goal. Where do you want to end up? So we might think it's here, but it actually is here. Okay. This is just to allow you the time to tune in and record what it is that you are seeing. For as you record what it is that you are recording, if you will, you then allow the energies to be harnessed inferentially in a new way. So really quickly with that, this just gives us the time. We're in this time, we're creating space, we're slowing it down a little bit so that we can literally timestamp and record what we are seeing, how we are seeing it, because that experience as a human is what is then pinged off of. Our feelings, our emotions, our memories are then recorded and are then able to be utilized by the children, okay, by our family of light workers, of beings, of our ancestors, of the future versions of us. They can then be harnessed because if we're creating it now, our future versions of us are already connecting into it because we've already done it by the time it gets to them. I love that. And it's a different way of interacting. Now, I also, I'm going to pause for a moment. So if we move into so I'm saying, you know, we're inferentially in a new way harnessing these energies. It means reasoning, logical. We use this to carry forward into deduction and induction. There's more though to this. This is just, it's inductive reasoning. We can use it through our observations. We're recording it, and then we're able to see it. And it says, ancient Greek philosophers, I love this. I think that's, we're going back into different, correct three-part in that building blocks for more complex reasoning, right? There's so much more. I love the inference engines. It's a reasoning system through, yeah, so we can then infer this energy in a new way. For the harnessing of these energies and frequencies creates the ability to display new time bands. So all of a sudden there's it's new time that wasn't accessible before. Let us roll back a moment. So if we roll back, we're shifting. It's like, I see that as a ball, right? It's earth. But anyways, your ability to see clearly and look at the light. And I love this little line here. It was kind of fun to write. Your ability to see clearly and look at the light that is viewing you. So the light, I'm seeing the light and it's looking back at me. And I'm seeing that it's looking at me. And I'm also seeing that I'm viewing it. So I'm viewing it, I'm seeing it, and I'm bringing it to me because I am taking the time to acknowledge that I'm viewing it and it's viewing me. And then I'm reviewing, I'm analyzing it, looking back at it. I'm going back into it. I'm viewing up, I'm looking up to more things. It's bringing me into a different view that you are. So I am also that light looking back at me. It gives you an analogous perspective to peer into the past. So if we think about like the whole thing about the stars and the Big Bang Theory, which that's not exactly how I see things, but that's okay. We can look back into the past by seeing stars, for example. Almost done, guys. Then we can compare it to other things. It gives us an analogous perspective to peer into the past. We're comparing it to things. It gives you the ability to peer in and through that which has been grooved out, if you will. Now, when I say grooved out, I'm seeing the grooves in the brain, the gray matter, and I'm also seeing the grooves that we talked about in the beginning of this writing in between the striations, grooves that were made because of weather patterns, because of water, because of wind, and they tell the time, right? It allows you to slip through the cracks. So again, it's underneath, seeing what's beneath all of that and looking at the space in between and not getting pulled into that timeline. We're now jumping in between going, oh, okay, I can see this and I can see that. And I put it, take a bite out of crime, take crack off the street, because these were tunnels or connection points between nodes to take me from this place to that place. When I think of take a bite out of crime, I go back to like what the 80s and McGruff. You guys remember that dog? Take a bite out of crime. And then when I say take crack off the street, I was thinking, well, what is it made out of really? It's a rock, right? It's chemicals. And we're taking it off of the location that it was from one perspective. Why is this relevant to that now moment? Your relevancy is clearly based. So it's a baseline, okay, it's clear. And they're showing me use this as tools. All words are tools. So we associate them with being negative or positive. Doesn't mean that we're gonna go out and tell someone I hate you. But we can hear the word hate and say, okay, well, what does that, why am I hearing that word? And then it might take us to another section, connect the dots, so to speak. So we're using them as tools and connection points. And again, it's about the memory, it's about the nodes. And if we can stay in that neutral point of view, we're canceling out those waves that are disharmonious. I was hearing free bass, what lines flow away. So just taking me back into time just by that song, right? It allows you to launch into a different spectrum. You do this all while sitting in your chair. I was feeling overwhelmed when I was writing this. And when I wrote, there's so much here, there's so much hair. Well, it's the 3 hairs. It's infinite. Okay, it's that connection. And if you guys don't know what I'm referring to, I did a video about this a while. The 3 hairs is right here. It's connection to all of the rabbits are linked together in this triangle by their ears, hearing, hair, and it's essentially a triquetra. So there's the triquetra. So we're creating this, and what I keep seeing is we're those spaces kind of in between right here. This is us. Okay. And so where do I begin? Again and again and again. It's infinite. We are creating beyond the illusion, for that which has been created is an illusion. So what I'm seeing is that which has been. So we might think looking back, something was the way it was, but it's not necessarily that way anymore. That's an illusion, because that's not the way time really works. We think that's real, but technically it's not the 100% truth. It's only one perspective. It's only one version of the truth of this codex. Does that make sense? That could be a completely separate video on its own. All that you see is a divisive mechanism. So this was where I kind of wasn't sure what that meant. And I had gone in and looked up here. Divisive. And it was a little bit, couldn't quite understand because it wasn't exactly what I was looking for. And of course, we know divisive is usually negative, right? We always associate the word divisive as someone being calculating, right? But that is word origin. That is it. So what I'm writing is everything that has been created was a divisive mechanism. So from one perspective, if we're looking at polarization, okay, and we're saying, we're saying it's polarized. So it's a scheme, it's a schematic. The bad guys were trying to get the good guys to do their bidding. So they were very divisive. And we could say that from one perspective has happened. But from another perspective, it's calculated. So a lot of what we're seeing around us was calculated in order to pull us in to a particular timeline, okay? But so everything in our reality is a calculation, whether to create what we see. So we could go with this, we could go with that, two sides of the coin. So everything you see is a mechanism, useful, divisive, a device to create calculations in our reality. So it's whether it's astrological alignments, geometric configurations, mathematical composition, sound, it's all divisive. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a negative thing. Oops, I'm going to screen share again. And so that's something to keep in mind. From one perspective it is, and from another perspective that's not the case. So if I go to divisive word origin, having a quality of dividing. So it was created to divide us, to keep us divided. Yet at the same time, I also think of cell division. Divide and conquer. So we went out and we, as let's say part of source creator, have divided ourselves so far from source so that we could experience as far away as we could. And now we're coming back into that oneness, right? So it was created so that we wouldn't feel, we would forget, so that we wouldn't remember everything, because this is an experiential reality that we are here to experience in order to create memory through our experience that then holds not only information, but feelings and frequency and life support. And then I wrote, this is a divisive mechanism that has been created to restore your ability to create. So it's almost like some of this stuff that was created to divide us is actually restoring our ability to create, because we're like even more expansive now than we might have been before, if that makes sense. When I went into divide and conquer, what came through was divide and rule, which I really thought was very interesting. Again, we got these philosophers coming up, and there's so many different ways that we could go with this. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but it's also an algorithmic strategy, and it recursively breaks down a problem with two or more sub problems of the same related type until they become simple enough to be solved directly, which I thought was so symbolic. We're talking about sub. So essentially divide it, divide it, divide it, divide it, and then it can be solved. Whereas before we might be thinking, well, if you divide everybody, they don't know what they're doing. But as light workers, we are like, oh, we're still all connected. Whew. I think I'm almost done. So I was seeing some symbology here. For you were once lost in a sea of creation, unknowingly creating, unknowingly ripping apart the fabric of time, space in which you were aligned with. Now, I use the word time, space. I know some people say time doesn't exist, space isn't what we think it is. Let's just play here and not get hung up on what it really is, because this is a multidimensional perspective, again, to tie into many things. So when I say I was lost in a sea of creation, unknowingly creating, we could look at it right now. We are divine creators. We're lost in this ocean that has already been created, and we're here, and some of us are not aware that we're creating in this ocean. And that then rips apart, so it separates, okay, and pulls information from the fabric of time, okay. And I was like, oh, that sounds a little alarming. And then I was hearing, don't be alarmed at the idea of ripping space-time apart. We are not saying you were involved in time jumper. So that was another video I did. The time jumpers, it called them the time interlopers. There were people who abused the knowledge of this way to work with this, but we're in the process of clearing all that. We've cleared the air on a lot of that. And it's like you were not necessarily part of that jumpsuit. So it's a suit. Anyways, so RIP has many layers to it. So we're ripping out information. We're taking it from one area and putting it onto something else. And we're creating rest in peace. We're helping it to rest in peace so that it isn't this negative, closed network. We're going into open source network. And as you resource this information, it allows us, our guides, our future versions of us, to resource with you. So when we tune into this guidance system, it creates that channel and it strengthens it, number one. And number two, it creates a pattern, number two, and it allows us to connect into source more through the spirit that moves in all things, whatever we want to label it as. And it allows all of the creative aspects that we are to expand, to grow, to experience, to learn, to share information. And then that connects us back to source rather than keeping us separate. It also means we're utilizing these energies again in a different way. And I put codes and fractional abilities. We're able to divide into things. We're dividing, but we're actually then going into something else to divide it into, back into oneness. So acclimating with these frequencies, I put there are two different perspectives. There are two different ways to view things. Of course, there are more ways than two. So we show you both sides of the coin. So two was just to share. You've got heads and you've got tails. You've got dark, you've got light. You've got yin, you've got yang. And basically we're that middle ground. So if you flip the coin and then you spin it and you get into the center of that spin, you're in between both sides, or you're seeing both sides. And it says you allow to dip in between the middle ground. So I do see this as moving in between worlds, okay? We're then in between the middle ground. We're not the middle ground, we're actually in between that. It's almost like invisible from one perspective, to see more visibly, see more visibility. We dissect from a multi-layered, multi-perpetual point of view. So then we pull this information from, we're not just in the middle ground, because that would just be one layer. We're dipping in between the middle ground. So that is the multidimensional. We're not in one dimension, we're in many dimensions at the same time. in a perpetual motion, okay? And on a perpetual motion clock, those watches, they have to keep moving. Otherwise they stop, right? And that leads me back to frequency, right? The hertz. You may wonder why we reference so much with time right now. It is because the coordinates on your system are mapping you into a particular timeology. All right. So we all have coordinates. We all have a blueprint. We all have a map that we are following, that we chose from one perspective. Coordinates are on a map to show us where we need to go, where we have been, and where we might like to go. So I like to go back into ology. So I keep saying timeology, reflectology. So remembering ology is referring to a certain type of speech or a story, speaking or writing. So this is how we're speaking. It's a story we're creating about time. The mapping coordinates. So it helps to keep us coordinates us. When we have coordination, right, we're aligned, we're balanced, okay, we're in rhythm. The mapping coordination or rhythm then coordinates, organizes, cords us to the innate, our direct connection to our innate ability source, connects with the innate to the core, to the truth, to the core of the earth, to the core of source, and it puts everything in a sequence. So we're able then to see the value, we're able to see the order of things. Different characteristics that create a linear projection, and that then creates a reality subordination. So it gives us the ability to linearize and project in that linear aspect from a multidimensional way. I'm going to pause just for a moment. Wow, how much more do I have? I might have to do part 2. Yeah, I'm going to end on this note. So I'm like tired. So I'll just end on this paragraph. If we go into the reality subordination, I'm just going to talk about this just for a moment. So this particular story, okay, I'm seeing this as below, so sub, right? And a subordinate is usually a hierarchy, and it's a system of below. But what I'm saying is, where was I? Numerological. The mapping, it creates a reality subordination. So linear projection does create a reality subordination. The old reality especially creates a system of hierarchy, and it means that they, us versus them kind of thing, we don't have the power, they do kind of thing, right? But on the other side of the coin, what I'm seeing has more to do with an arrangement. So it talks about a lower order. It talks about below or set and arrange in order. So it's a rank or a series. But it also means to make auxiliary or dependent. So that has to do with, okay. Oh boy, we could go so many different places. Up from under, that's what I was looking for. Up from under, oh, I love that. And order, I don't know where the intonation goes, but so we'll play with that. So it creates a reality. Basically, we're coming up from underneath. Like, where did that come from? That's a big part of what this means. And this subordination creates, and we're subordinates. We're not going to go with the old, right? We're coming up from underneath and we're saying no more. It creates ordinates a sequential set of numerological, counterintuitive. So what it is it's counting, it's a counter that we are counting intuitively. So a numerological. So this is a little deeper than I want to go into right now, but essentially it's undercover. We're doing it secretly, but there's so much more. I was guided to play with Aho. So if I go into Aho, which I've used many times, agreement, yes. I think it means a lot more than that actually, but Amen, Aho. It's used, I use it in prayer, but I'm going to go into that a little bit because what for me, I'll pause, it's a double meaning, of course, right? We have two meanings for all of this. So for me, Aho, that's in agreement with what I was saying, because I was like, oh, it's counterintuitive. It's like not what we would think, right? So what we're doing is countering through our intuitiveness, and we're creating the count, we're creating the rhythm, and it is counting, it meaning the spirit that moves in all things. And we're beating the clock, we're beating the old system. And I don't mean that in a hierarchical way. But when I put Aho, it's yes, Amen. It's a sound, it's a frequency, it's a hertz, a vibration, but also it has to do with chemistry, and it has to do with a few things. We've got the atomic mass number is kind of what came through for me for the A. The other thing that came through had something to do with hydroxide. So I wrote a lot about Hi-Ho years ago, and it's usually a minor, it functions as a base and a catalyst. And I just saw that as just symbolic when I was looking at this. And if you look at it, I just think that's very symbolic because it reminds me of I can't remember exactly what I said in the beginning, but having to do with that mirrored reflection through geometry. This is what it looks like. Look at the bridge. I mean, that's a schematic representation of this bihydroxide atom, or ion, which reminds me of what it looks like through the tree and the nodes. And it reminds me of the mirrored reflection that was within the original, whatever I wrote. Oh, well, this is interesting. The infrared spectra of compounds. What? Containing the OH functional group have strong absorption bands. The high frequency of molecular vibration is a consequence of the small mass of the hydrogen atom as compared to the mass of the oxygen atom. This is hilarious, you guys. However, the bandwidth increases when the OH group is involved in hydrogen bonding. I just think this is all symbolic. Wow. Okay. So I'm going to end on that right now and just kind of put a little rainbow there. And a lot of information. If you guys have made it this far, gold star for you. Thank you for tuning in and just kind of playing in this energy and these messages. You guys, I could go so many places. My brain is just, I'm a sponge. My sponge is full. But what I wanted to share is just to end on this note, you guys, this is what we're doing. I'm sharing my own synchronicity and how I see it and how I write about it. You guys are doing it in your own way. And I am seeing so many beautiful sisters and brothers coming together right now and creating together and forming this schematic of energy that essentially is allowing everything to change. You guys, this is where it comes back to know thyself, be the change. This is such a ripple effect that it's difficult to wrap our brains around, and we can't. Yet the more we let go of resistance and just feel into our own expression as a divine human, compassion and caring for one another, and letting go of the need to control and dictate others and how they should feel or not feel, so on and so forth. It's about us creating what we came here to create. Healing, it's, you know, doing beautiful things for the earth, planting trees, helping people heal, finding new technologies that can be useful for the collective, sharing beautiful poems, allowing ourselves to just say, you matter, let's work together and create a beautiful world. So lastly, all the stuff that we see going on out around us, I keep writing about it over and over again, it's going to continue from one perspective to seem really out of alignment. But that is that separation that's creating these bigger striations and the bigger space in between that we then move in and we're like, okay, now we're in. So now from the inside out, we're going to remap this system. And in that process, we're dissolving the old system underneath their feet. They don't even know how to contain us because our container has no boundaries from one perspective. So in love and light, you guys, so much fun. Namaste.